The Royals have a lot of guys playing different spots, and for some of them, playing out of position. So who's going to play where? We'll give you our thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And as you know by now, you can find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, we're on Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. If this is the first episode you are tuning into, well, we can give you a little bit of a rundown as to how this thing works. We bring you 5 episodes a week, unless I'm sick or I'm going to be traveling. We'll have a little bit of a hang-up this week. May or may not be able to get an episode out very early Friday morning, but I'll be traveling. If I am, and I'm not able to get an episode out for a Mailbag Friday, then I will just answer every single question on Twitter, and probably later on Sunday, I'll be able to get to some of those YouTube questions. But for those new listeners, you have anything on your mind about the Royals, send them to my Twitter handle or leave them on any of our videos below, and I'll be sure to get that notification. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Good news for Royals fans is that tonight you're going to be able to watch the game, at least when I am doing this podcast. I'm still a few hours away from when the Royals will take on the San Francisco Giants. That game will be televised on the FanDuel Sports Network. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my evening, as well as watching some of the play-in games in Dayton, Ohio, and gearing up for tomorrow for a very busy slate of NCAA tournament games. But as you know, with our podcast here, we love baseball. Baseball takes precedent over all other sports, and even if it's a spring training game, we are going to be watching that. So we'll have thoughts on that more on tomorrow's episode. Michael Wacha is going to be going a little bit deeper into the game. One of his final starts before spring training. Jonathan India is in the lineup tonight. In fact, it's close to what I expect the opening day lineup to be, minus a couple of changes in 2 spots. I think Dairon Blanco is playing tonight in center field, and then Freddie Fermin's behind the plate and Salvi's at first base. But for the most part, you see a lot of the guys that are going to be out there next Thursday. And by the way, on that, the Guardians just officially announced their opening day starter. So we have it official that Cole Reagans will take on Tanner Bybee on Thursday afternoon at Kauffman Stadium. Should be a sellout. Right now, the early 10-day forecast shows great weather for the game. Knock on wood for that. Hopefully it stays in the high 60s, low 70s, and we get lots of sun for that series against the reigning American League Central champions in the Cleveland Guardians. As for our first segment, this is going to be a question that we constantly ask ourselves until the Royals eventually take on Cleveland next Thursday, which is, where is everybody going to be playing? That's been maybe a question going back to the time they acquired Jonathan India, which I want to say was in November. Yeah, it was right around Thanksgiving week, if I'm not mistaken. When they brought in Jonathan India, that sparked the question. Where is everyone going to play? You have Jonathan India, who has only played second base. You have Michael Massey, who has only played second base. You've got Hunter Renfroe coming back, MJ Melendez. You have Michael Garcia. And there was this thought process to move around a lot of guys, right? Jonathan India is going to learn how to play third base. Jonathan India is going to learn how to play left field. Michael Massey is going to do the same thing, though I've only seen Massey at second base and left field. Michael Garcia has gotten some work out there in center field. And I'll be honest, from what I've seen, it's not been great out there. It's not been flawless, nor did I expect it to be. Let me be very clear. At the big league level, learning a different position can be very challenging. And Jonathan India playing a little bit more third base tonight. I believe he's at second base, but he's been playing some third base. I feel it's a better fit for him there than left field. However, this isn't one of those things they're going to abandon where, oh, we gave him a few innings in left field. Not good enough for us. And since it's spring training, it doesn't make any sense for us to try it in the regular season when you could be costing teams big league games. That was a talking point last night when Jose Altuve, who's going to be learning left field, I don't know what it is about second baseman going to left field, but that's clearly been the plan for a few teams out there. But Jose Altuve dropped a routine fly ball that cost their pitcher a few runs in their spring training game the other day. Something you want to avoid. It's also something you're going to have to work through. These guys are going to have to play different positions. And it's not as simple as, well, put Jonathan India at third base then. Well, they love Maikel Garcia's defense over at third base, and they believe that Garcia can take a big step forward in his third year in Kansas City. Is that at third base? Is that in center field? Are you going to DH Michael Massey more because he dealt with that back injury? Well, I've got my thoughts, and feel free to leave your thoughts below in the YouTube comments here, or you can leave them on my Twitter handle. But when you look at the state of the Royals outfield, you've got an elite defender in center field in Kyle Isbell. Whether you like him or not, he's going to be the starting center fielder. Then you're going to have Hunter Renfroe in right field. They could platoon with Melendez and Renfroe on opening day since Bybee is a right-hander. We could see MJ Melendez in right field. I just feel more confident in saying Hunter Renfroe is going to play in right. I have gone back and forth with what they're going to do in left field on opening day. I have a hard time believing they're going to put MJ Melendez on the bench. I have a hunch that they're going to give him the nod on opening day. It is opening day for that matter, and it's going to be a sold-out crowd, and maybe introducing that sort of plan of putting India in left field and Garcia in center, or maybe Michael Massey in left field might be a stretch. On opening day, it's just not going to surprise me if the usual outfield plays there. It may be completely different on Saturday when the Royals will bring out those all powder blue uniforms. Now it brings me to the infield. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be at short. Vinny Pasquantino is going to be at first. Salvi's going to be behind the plate. And I believe for this game, they're going to DH Michael Massey or Jonathan India. For opening day, it's a spectacle for Royals fans. It's a spectacle for baseball fans in general. There's a lot of eyeballs out there. And I think the easiest path to kind of working in the Jonathan India experiment in left field, the Jonathan India experiment at third base, Michael Massey and left, Garcia in center, maybe don't do it on opening day when that can set the tone for your season. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There's 162 of these. The first game, as we saw last year, where the Royals did not score, had one run on opening day, only had 2 runs in the first 2 games. Like, that's going to influence some people out there, not everybody, but you kind of have to understand what I'm getting at here. Opening day is a big deal. And the last thing you want to see is Jonathan India, a brand new Royal, struggle out there. So going with that lineup, it feels safer. It feels safer with what you're going to be running out defensively when you have Melendez, who spent the entire year in left field out there, and you've got that luxury of not having a true DH. And maybe I shouldn't call it a luxury, but Jonathan India or Michael Massey can DH, and you're not having to worry about it then. Everybody's playing in position. Spring training has been this time for the Royals to try out some different spots. I don't get the sense that every other night Jonathan India is moving around. I believe they view him as a second baseman, and he needs to have a backup position. In the same way Michael Massey has to have a backup position. And with Maikel Garcia, he's not going to be the opening day center fielder, in my opinion, and he's not going to split time with Kyle Isbell out there. He is a third baseman. He's going to be able to play around, and it's part of why I believe Cavan Biggio makes this roster, and we'll talk about him in the second segment. You got that flexibility in the outfield and in the infield. You got guys that can play everywhere. And the Royals do love that. It's that Tampa Bay Rays influence that Matt Quatraro and Paul Hoover brought over. You have guys that can play multiple spots. It keeps them in the lineup every single day. They're also not stupid. If it's not working somewhere, they're not going to force the issue. Sometimes they're going to have to work through it because they're not going to abandon that move 2 weeks into trying it out. They've got great coaches to work with the outfielders. Damon Hollins out there, Mitch Meyer. You have Aguasil on the infield. He was instrumental in improving Bobby Witt Jr.'s defense, Salvador Perez's defense over at first base, Michael Garcia transitioning from shortstop to third base. They've got the pieces in place there. But when I look at the Royals to start the year, that may be the best lineup to work with. And if MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe are hitting, then yes, I feel very confident that's where everybody's going to be playing. Not to say they're not going to move around, but if you were to run out the same lineup every single night, that's what it would come back to with me. I don't know if Jonathan India is going to be the opening day left fielder, mainly because I think they want to see MJ Melendez's bat out there. Give him the first couple of series if there is a spark there. Same goes for Hunter Renfroe. If there's not that spark, if you see more of the same, now let's try to get more of that movement out there where India is playing some left field. And I do expect in that series, Jonathan India to play left field, or maybe Jonathan India to play third base. You know, having Garcia and Melendez and Renfroe and Isbell in the lineup every single day, it's fine defensively. And maybe not at all spots fine defensively. But offensively is what I'm looking at. You can't expect all four to hit. And that's where once Jack Caglione may be ready, they go out there and add another bat. You can't be playing those guys every single day. But to start the year, you do have to know what you have. And I would like to see Jonathan India get off to a good start at the plate. And the best way to do that, if you ask me, is to keep it simple for where he's playing. Play him at second or DH him. Michael Massey, same thing. Trade off. One game they're at second, the other game they're DHing. If you want to have that Sunday game where you try it out, maybe you do, or maybe it's matchup based. A team that's not constantly hitting in the air, a bunch of power hitters. You don't want to, have Jonathan India exerting too much out there where he's still trying to get his feet wet at the position. Kyle Isbell can cover a lot of ground. He can't cover both left and right field. So as I said, you're not abandoning it, but I feel that the best course of action for this team is just to keep it simple early on. If you have Jonathan India hitting and everybody's hitting, now you can try to move some pieces around. And I do believe the Royals are trying to figure out where India feels the most comfortable other than second base. Is it third? Is it left? I would expect third base, but if Garcia can give you a boost in the lineup, you want Garcia at third base. And you can keep everybody in the lineup until somebody just is deemed unplayable. And that may happen. Maybe that doesn't happen. That's just one man's take right now. I feel that on opening day, they keep it rather simple. India or Massey's going to DH. They'll have Melendez, Isbell, and Renfroe in the outfield. And Garcia at third base for that matter. Okay, let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, how important can Cavan Biggio be for this team? Maybe the bigger question is, can he be better than Garrett, Hampson, and Adam Frazier? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15, at JOHNYJ_15. Want to give a shout out to a few of our sponsors today, beginning with Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Please use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Also want to tell you about Gametime. There's nothing like the energy of an MLS match, the chance, the atmosphere, the last-minute goals. If you want to experience it all live, Gametime makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last-minute ticket deals, all-in pricing, and lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLS tickets. Plus, ticket prices actually drop as kickoff gets closer, so you can score amazing seats at a great price. And we know opening day is right around the corner, so go get your tickets at Gametime. Like I said, take the guesswork out of it. Make it simple on you. When I go to buy tickets, I only buy tickets over at Gametime. So download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Royals bench has become more of a talking point in these last couple of weeks. The good news is that's what you want it to be going into the final few games of spring training. You don't want to be talking about who's starting where. If you're talking about, well, is so-and-so starting in right field or is the other guy going to be starting in right field? As we see in football, if you have quarterback controversy in fall camp, it's not a good thing. It doesn't mean that you have two great guys that are deserving for the starting job. It's simply that your number one is not close, or is close to your number two. You want to have a pretty significant gap between the starter and the bench player. And for the Royals, I wouldn't go as far as that. Like the gap between Hunter Renfroe and Cavan Biggio isn't as large as Cavan Biggio and Bobby Witt Jr., of course. You still have to have good depth, and you still have to be versatile if you're going to be on the Royals bench. You have to be able to shine somewhere. And I imagine that's what the Royals are trying to identify when it comes to their bench. Like Freddie, for me, is great defensively and can hit a little bit. Now, that's rare to have from a bench player. Usually it's one or the other. You want to have somebody who's a great fourth outfielder defensively, or you have a guy that has a lot of power. Rarely do you have somebody who can do a little bit of both. Freddie Fermin does that for the Royals. The other three bench spots, it is one or the other. Like Dairon Blanco can hit a little bit, as we saw in that Cincinnati series last year. He is known, though, for his ability to steal bases. You're not paying Dairon Blanco. You're not giving him a spot on the roster because he's a great defender or he's a great hitter. You are putting him on the roster because he can steal bases. Then you have these last two. Is it Nick Loftin and Cavan Biggio? Is it Cavan Biggio and Joey Wiemer? Is it Cavan Biggio and Nick Prado or Nelson Velasquez? That is where I'm at. I'm very confident Cavan Biggio makes this roster. And I have been now really ever since I left Surprise, Arizona. Not just because of how he's fared in camp. The batting average isn't phenomenal, but the on-base number is. His on-base is well north of 440 at this point. So that's what Cavan Biggio brings you. He's not going to hit 300. He's likely going to hit around where Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson were, but he's going to get on base at a 310, 315 clip. That might be good enough to keep him on the bench, assuming he can play multiple defensive spots and play them well. You know, it's one thing to be versatile and be the super utility man. It's another to actually play a few of those spots pretty well. Like you could make a case that a chunk of major leaguers can play multiple spots. Doesn't mean they're good at them. You know, for some of the Royals bench guys, like Dairon Blanco, you can put him in center field. He is an outfielder. He can catch fly balls. He's not going to play it that well. We saw the same thing with Edward Olivares out there. Like Edward Olivares is not going to be a great defender in center field. And with Biggio, I don't see him being a great defender at all of those spots, but give me three. Be good at second, be good at third, maybe be good at one of the outfield spots because that's where you're going to be playing the most. That's what we saw with Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson. With Hampson, it was center and second base. With Frazier, it was second base and right field. You get that extra spot defensively, that's going to really give you some leeway if you're struggling at the plate. And that's where I bring in Nick Loftin. Will the duo of Nick Loftin and Cavan Biggio be better than Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson? I understand there will be some people that comment and say, well, it can't be any worse than it was last year. Frazier was terrible and Hampson was terrible. We sometimes undervalue like MLB veterans that can play multiple spots, can do little things, can mesh well with other guys. And no, was Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson doing a lot for the team last year other than being able to play multiple spots? They weren't giving you much at the plate. There were moments, there were flashes. And with Biggio and Loftin, they have the higher upside. I can say this, though, about Nick Loftin. We haven't seen it for an entire big league season. Adam Frazier was an all-star. Garrett Hampson had hit close to 300 the year before he came over to Kansas City. He was a singles hitter, but he was quick on the bases. He could play a number of spots. Frazier, same thing. We can't undervalue that. Cavan Biggio was on 3 teams last year. There's a reason he was on 3 teams. He just wasn't good enough to stick anywhere. Nick Lofton hit well below 200 last year. So the upside's there. They're younger. And I do believe Cavan Biggio, with his approach at the plate, he's always had a double-digit number in walk rate. Like, that can give you an advantage from time to time, because he might get on base just once when he starts. It's still maybe one more time than Adam Frazier, Garrett, Hampson was going to be able to give you night in and night out. So I like the upside there, and I like the flexibility he can give the Royals, as well as having a little bit more pop in that bat. That's something we knew no matter how many times you played Frazier and Hampson, they just were not going to give you. They weren't going to give you any form of pop. Frazier had that go-ahead home run in Anaheim. Garrett Hampson did not really come close to hitting one. At least I can't remember one. I don't believe he got a hold of one in one of the smaller parks, unless I'm completely blanking. If I have, again, respond in the comments and when Garrett Hampson homered for the Royals. I just can't think of one. With Frazier, he homered against the Angels, and I want to say one more team where it was Boston. I believe he led off in the game and homered against Boston. Still, Biggio's got, 8 to 10 home run pop. I don't know if he'll play that often where he is getting in the lineup to run into 10 home runs. We've just seen it before. To me, it's about getting on base. It's about playing some spots well defensively, and that allows him to be better than those 2 guys. There's also a chance he completely bottoms out, and the Royals get rid of him before June. There is always that possibility based off what he did last year, though when I talked to him in camp, he felt it was a good fresh start. His first, spring training with a new team. He'd always been with Toronto. There was a lot of expectation there. Now there's no expectation for him. He's a guy in a minor league deal that needs to earn his way onto the roster, and I believe that he's been able to do that. Okay, let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, is Joey Wiemer making a late push to make the opening day roster? I'll tell you what I think next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our final sponsor we're going to give a shout out to is Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with 2-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. And if you're like me, I do struggle to get the motivation to go to the gym. I have worked out before. I like to stay active. But sometimes that pre-workout, that creatine, it gives you the extra bump, the extra juice to go to the gym and actually lift productively. I actually just got 2 bags of it, got them in the mail the other day, I've been using it. And yes, now I can actually have some energy after work to go to the gym, which I always struggle to deal with a little bit. But with Just Ingredients, visit them at justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Now, in continuing that topic of the Royals outfield, the depth pieces off the bench, I mean, we are coming up on a week to go before opening day, the start of the 2025 regular season. And I'm still going back and forth as to who is going to be out there on the first baseline when the Royals introduce the entire team, the starters, the reserves, the bullpen, the rotation, the coaches. Is Joey Wiemer going to be standing out there? And I love that compared to 2 years ago when you're asking about who's starting where, I am putting a segment in here 8 days before opening day about will this guy who didn't even stick in the big leagues last year be on the Royals bench. It's a sign of that things are getting better and the team is expecting more when we are worrying about the final 2 spots on the roster. But for Joey Wiemer, I don't want it to get twisted here. It's not that I don't view him as a starter, because I very much believe if Kyle Isbell does not hit well and Joey Wiemer can prove he can handle center field, I could see him being the everyday starter for the Royals in the future. I really could. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the arm. If the bat can be there and he can prove that he is maybe 85% the fielder that Kyle Isbell is, I could see him starting every single day. So Kyle Isbell has to hit even more so than he did last year. And Wiemer's got the power. Wiemer also showed at the minor league level last year that his approach is more well-rounded. And what's fascinating about him is that you look at some of the numbers of the beginning of spring training. And I got sidetracked there looking at a text I just got. Wanted to make sure it was no breaking news involving Joey Wiemer and if he made or didn't make the roster. But Joey Wiemer in the first 5 or 6 games of spring training was hitting $150. In fact, it got below 100 at one point. And I had crossed him off my list. I just said he was one of those guys that needed to have a strong camp. He hasn't done so. And I'm not going to put him on my list when he clearly needs every day at bats in Omaha. And the Royals still may do that. You know, center field depth in the minor league level. There's John Rave out there. You know, you have Nelson Velasquez, who's likely going to be out there, assuming he would clear waivers. Nick Prado, same thing. You know, Tyler Gentry. You know, so does Joey Wiemer make the team because they need to have every day at bats for Tyler Gentry and John Rave? Or is Joey Wiemer that guy where, hey, we need to have Dairon Blanco up here and Nick Lofton, and we need to make sure that Joey Wiemer's playing somewhere every single day in Omaha, because if he proves that he can handle the outfield a little bit and that bat is coming along, who knows? Maybe by June or July, he'll get his opportunity. But now that I've seen this progression, and it's been nice to see, because in those first 5 or 6 games, he looked completely overmatched. Like there was no need to put Joey Wiemer out there every single day when some of the numbers he was putting up were just ghastly. I mean, it was bad. He was striking out at a high rate. That's something he had done before. But now you look up, he has raised his batting average by damn near 150 points in the last few games. I get it, spring training, right? I get that you're playing every other day and the numbers are going to spike, right? You have a good 3 games, you might go from hitting 100 to 350. But it got as low as 0.083 on March 3rd. That's what Joey Wiemer was hitting. He had a 353 OBP, so he was still getting on base at a high clip, but he's gone from 0.083 to 258. He's hitting 350 in March. OBP of 435. He's got a slug of 700. He's homered a couple of times, playing good enough defense. He's got the arm. With as little as how some of the other bench players have provided in camp, he has now put himself maybe not just back in the conversation, and he was always going to be in the conversation, but more so toward the top half of this conversation. He might be number 2 next to Nick Lofton, because Lofton's had a pretty good camp, and they're playing Lofton just about everywhere. So it comes down to, do the Royals want to do the same thing as they did last year, where you have 2 utility guys, one from the left side, one from the right side, or do they want to have Biggio just be that super utility guy and Joey Wiemer as an extra outfielder they have? Because you are going to be playing India in left field a little bit, and Massey and Garcia, and you want to be able to trust that, hey, there's a couple of outfielders off the bench that late in the game you can bring them in there. And Joey Wiemer does have that pop where Nick Lofton does not. And with the Royals looking at Adam Duvall a few weeks ago, are they wanting that off the bench? Where Nelson Velasquez in camp has shown that he is not that guy. Nick Prado does not have the pop to show that he's that guy. We've seen it a little bit at the big league level. With Joey Wiemer, to have that upside of, oh, he could be the 4th outfielder, you're playing maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. And if he catches fire and he shows the type of player the Royals expect him to be, now it was the right move. It also could be working against you, where if he's not playing every single day in Kansas City, that's just stunting his development a little bit. Where in Omaha, he would be playing every single day. I will say, though, I mean, he just put himself back into the top half of that conversation. Like, to me, there are 4 guys fighting for a spot, unless they bring in a free agent. You got Lofton, you got Wiemer, you've got Velasquez, you've got Prado. I believe it's cut in half. I believe Lofton has made a really good case. I believe Wiemer has now made a very good case. Prado and Velasquez have not done enough for me. You could be asking about Drew Waters. I'd put him where Prado and Velasquez are as well. But I have been impressed. It is spring training, but as I've said so many times in camp, these guys needed to have a good spring training. And now when you look at the numbers and how he's fared in the outfield, Joey Wiemer has done a very nice job. Okay, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to have a breakdown of what happens tonight between the Royals and the Giants, and it seems that Mac Quatrero has picked Bubic over Lynch for the rotation. We'll dive into that all tomorrow, but until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.